Guys, the topic today is to talk about the Genesis. So that's one of the books of Allan Kardec's codification of the Spiritism. So it's not to talk about actually the whole book. I should talk about one specific chapter in the book where he talks about science and the relationship with the Genesis. So before we start, I would like to just review quickly what is Genesis. So according to the dictionary, Genesis is the origin or the coming into being of something, anything. So, and it is actually a Greek word, and it means to be born. So when it is exactly the moment when something is being born. And in religious terms, they actually are usually referring to the origin of the universe, right? Or how the universe was created. Okay. So I think before we start talking about the Genesis itself, we have to focus on what is Spiritism then, right? How is Spiritism in anyhow connected to the Genesis? See by the definition of what Spiritism is, that Allan Kardec, when he was, let's say, founding, right, this line of thought, he connected three different things. So he was connecting science in the sense that Spiritism uses the scientific method. He was connecting religion in the sense that we have the belief in God and the belief in life after death, and the philosophy as well, because we have all the moral implications of this. Okay, so looking at each one of this specifically, so what in philosophy or what in moral does Spiritism focus on? So we focus on the moral consequences of our actions, right? So we know as Spiritists that everything we do, it has its own consequences. The second thing is that it focuses on this interaction, so that's one of the fields of study between the spiritual world and the physical world itself. And finally, it studies the communications between our, like, physical world, the world that most people are more familiar with, and the spiritual world itself. What about science though? So, for science, the Spiritism, it studied the laws that governs the invisible world and the relationship with the physical world or the corporeal world as well. It studies the laws of nature. So many times when you're studying like the books of Allan Kardec and other books, other Spiritist book, they frequently talk about how all the laws we're studying, they're natural things. They're not supernatural. They're related to the nature. And then there is the study of the Spiritists and of the spirits and their destiny after death. Again, and finally religion. So we have no codes, no rites, and no temples, although we know we get together to study, right, the Spiritist teachings. And we follow the Christian moral, which means we believe in Jesus and that he was a very evoked spirit that was here in our world to teach us very important moral values. Okay, so just briefly, the most important Spiritism beliefs. We believe in the existence of God, the existence of the spirits and their survival after death, and we believe in reincarnation, and that's totally connected with the moral development of the human beings, because we believe that everybody is always evolving, so we don't go back, we're always going forward. And we believe there are different worlds, and we believe in the communicability with the spirits. Okay, so who was Allan Kardec? And I think that's important. If we're talking about science, so we can see where he was coming from, right? Who was he? So Allan Kardec, this was not the name he was born to. He was, actually his name was Leon Rivail, and he was an educator, and he was an academic as well. So what he did, he was a very known member of several scholarly societies, and that included the Historic Institute of Paris and the Society of Natural Science. So he was studying, and so actually his focus of study was both with like the science field and the humanities field, since he was an educator. So he actually published different books, one about math and how to teach math to kids, and the other one was about it was about teaching as well. So he was an educator, And one interesting thing that I didn't know before doing this research is that he used to taught free courses for underprivileged people. So, okay, so he had all this academic and the scholar learning before he actually started studying the Spiritism. And today, when we had our lecture before, so we were talking about, and then Junia actually shared with us that he had a lot of experience with magnetism as well, before he was introduced to Spiritism. Okay, so these are like the 5 books of Spiritism codification. And then talking about science, before I actually got into the Genesis chapter that we're going to discuss, I looked into the Spiritist book, because if you are familiar with it, it has a lot of questions and answers. And then I wanted to see if there's something that they were talking there about specific science and how does science relate to Spiritism. And so question 147, it asks specifically why some scientists, they are so prone to deny religion, or in other words, why is that an anatomist, physiologist, and in general, those who apply themselves to the pursuit of natural sciences, they are so apt to fall into materialism, which means they are more prone to just believe that is the material world, but many scientists, they struggle in recognizing there is something beyond that, that is like a spiritual world. And the answer of the Spiritist, it says that the physiologist refers everything to the standard of his senses. Human pride imagines that it knows everything and refuses to admit that there can be anything which transcends the human understanding. Science itself inspires some minds with presumption. They think that nature can have nothing hidden from them. So I really like this answer, because it touches on something that is very common in the scientific world. Actually, I think everywhere where humans are involved, that is the pride, right? That's one of the things that we are constantly trying to fight against in ourselves. Because the pride, it makes us feel like we know everything. And if you are actually, usually when people are really intelligent, in the sense that they've learned a lot and they have a lot of experiences, they know that they know too little compared to everything that it is to know. But sometimes, or many times actually, scientists, they really believe that they know everything, and that everything that is to be known is things that we're able to see, right? Okay, so in here, I'm going to ask somebody to read this to me. So Leland, do you mind reading it?
Yes, no, not at all.
Thank you.
We see, therefore, that the task of deciding as to the truth or falsity of Spiritism does not fall within the scope of physical science. When Spiritist beliefs shall have become generalized, when they shall have been accepted by the masses, it will be with those beliefs as with all new ideas that have encountered opposition. And scientific men will end by yielding to the force of evidence. They will be brought individually by the force of things to admit ideas that they now reject. And until then, it would be premature to turn them from their special studies in order to occupy them with a matter which is foreign, alike to their habits of thought and to their spheres of investigation.
Thank you. And so I like this. You guys have to keep in mind that this was written in the 1859. So things are changing. So now actually we have many scientists that are studying the spiritual world, and that's something we're going to talk at the end. But it is interesting that he says that in that moment, it was maybe not the best option for scientists to actually study something that was not in their field, right? Okay, so in the Spiritist book, he also says that all human sciences, they offer the same variation of detail, and every investigator has his own system. So that's especially important for, like, me. I'm in biology, so that was my science. So I always struggled in understanding how humanities can be a science as well. So whenever I saw research talking about human science, because you are dealing with people, so your results are going to vary all the time. When you're dealing with a physical science like physics or biology, most of the time your results are replicated exactly the same. Because if you do something, let's say you're testing gravity, right? You let something go, you can calculate that, and the numbers are going to be the same if you do the same thing, again. However, when you're dealing with people and you ask the same question to 100 different people, you may get 100 different answers. So sometimes it is hard for us to understand that a science may be variable. You're not always going to get the same answers. But humane science are the same way. And I really like that later on, Kardec actually, he went over saying that even in the physical science or biology, for example, if you're studying botany, so you're studying plants, and you are following a lineal system, or you're following another system, it doesn't matter, like you're still studying about plants. So as long as you're following like the scientific method and you're trying to be accurate, that's still a science, right? And we have to keep in mind there are going to be many variations between everything. Okay, and then what is the book Genesis about? So actually what it is about, it tries to show how the world was created in the vision of Spiritism. So it talks a lot about science. I don't know how many of you actually had the chance of reading this book. My husband and I were reading it together, and we are actually overwhelmed sometimes. There is so much scientific information, and that is great. Like for us to learn about how the world was created. But he was very careful when every time he put like some scientific information, and he would always say, but that's a field that is still growing and we're still learning about this, so that's what we know right now. So he was very careful when dealing with science. But so it is just trying to show how modern science it correlates to the vision of the religious vision of Spiritism on how the world was created. Okay, so already in the introduction of the book, he talks there are two different forces that govern the universe, and one of them is the spiritual world or the spiritual element, and the other one is the material forces. And in this book, he was trying to make a connection between them, to explain how does this material world connect to the spiritual world in the creation of the universe. And so this is chapter 4, that's the one we're going to be focusing on today. So it is called the Scientific Note in Genesis. It is just made of 4 or 5 pages, so it is a short chapter. However, it is filled with information, and that's where in the book he actually tries to explain how mostly can Spiritism talk about science, since it is a religion. So he's trying to explain both these connections. And it actually is made of 17 different topics inside the chapter, and so we're going to go over most of them. So for the first one, he actually said that if you look at history, so actually history shows us that since the beginning of times, most civilizations, they actually had a combined knowledge of law, religion, and science. So he said that at the beginning, we wouldn't have everything like in different compartments, but people would have their laws, for example, connected to the science or to the religion, and they would have a book. And one example that I found about it was the, I don't know how to say this in English, but is this a Hammurabi Code?
Code of Hammurabi.
Hammurabi, okay. So the Hammurabi Code, it was a code that was followed as a law by some nations, but this law was actually filled with different moral and religious viewings. So they say that it actually looks a lot like the 10 Commandments. So I never read it by itself, but it is from almost 2,000 years before Christ, and it is one of the oldest actually books like in the world that they have like that much information about. And it is interesting because, as I said, it is religious, but at the same time it connects the civil laws that the society had to follow. And so he's already showing that before we actually compartmentalized everything, moral and religion and science, they were things that used to be combined. On the second topic, then it tells about how the ideas though, so all the ideas that we have about the natural world, they were developed. So they actually were very different from what we know now. And even when he wrote this book, that was, as I said, in 1859, things were different. So, no, sorry, this one was actually in 1868. Yeah, not the Spiritist book. So that's one example. So people used to believe before that Earth was flat and the sky was like a dome, so like a velar dome, where the stars would just be like hanging in the air. And now we know that's not true, but that was the thing that people used to believe in this before. So what Allan Kardec says in this topic is that there was a successive development of understanding on how the natural world actually works. And he said that's fine, because if people actually knew that the world was round and that the planets rotate around the sun, that it was too much information for people to deal with back then. And so that's why all the development in our understanding is actually gradual. Okay, then we have on topics 3 and 4, he talks more about the main, the development of the learning. And so he said that in that date, that was in the 19th century when he wrote the book, he believed there was still not enough knowledge to understand how the world was created. So he knew that they didn't know everything. But he said, on the other hand, that he believed that most of what is important was already known. And that man, they were actually unable to solve the problem of creation until science has given him the key to do it. So he believed that science was a very important key to unlocking this knowledge of Genesis, or how the world was created. And then he talked about specific sciences, and he focused more on astronomy and physics, and he talked about how astronomy brought us this idea of the Big Bang, and then that the galaxies were first created, and that was about 14 billion years ago, Big Bang occurred, that's what we know now. And that for example, planet Earth was just created around a little bit less than 5 billion years ago. So he's saying that it's science who has been elected to constitute the true genesis according to the laws of nature. So in any point he says that science has to be denied. Is actually quite the opposite. So he says that we should embrace all the new knowledge that science is bringing to us. Okay, that's then for on 5, he just makes specific comments on how we now, like, sometimes we are very critics of things that we see that we don't agree with. But he said, for example, in the Bible or in the Gospel, but that sometimes we forget that maybe the more important meaning was lost in different translations, and even the cultural aspect of it. Because I remember somebody saying, I think that was Haroldo Dutra, that the first language that they used to actually write the gospel was it Greek?
Greek.
And they had, but Jesus used to speak or talk in Aramaic. And so it looks like they have much less words than our language has today, like 10,000 words or something like this. And because of this, they said that there is so much that is lost in the translation, because, for example, they cannot use a word. Let's say that we have different words for the word love nowadays, like charity, love, doing good, but they have just one. And so many things that Jesus and others are trying to tell us, it was lost in different translations or in the different cultural aspects of it. And that reminds me when there's one passage in the Bible that I don't remember who, but they desired to the other, I wish you have like fat in your teeth. And that looks very weird, but it's actually because they believe that when you eat something that is fatty or very rich, you were happy, right? Like, that's good that you have food. And so that was like, I wish you happiness. But in the translation, they actually translated it literally, and so it got kind of lost. So he talks about this as well. So he says we have to keep in mind that some things that look like they are errors or they don't make any sense, they are actually more in appearance. So they're wrong only in appearance than in reality. Then in topic 6, he talks about the Bible, and especially the Genesis in the Bible. And he says that we have, once again, we have to keep all this in mind, that their science was not well developed back then, and we have to try to focus on the positive side and the good teachings that it brought to us, than on the bad side or the things that we don't agree with. And that was particularly good for me, because I tend to see the bad side in things, or the things that I don't agree with, more than the good things. And that's actually representing like Adam and Eve. And he says that we cannot take everything literally, right? We can try to look at what is good about it, and then especially like the moral teachings about it, and not just the literal things that they're talking about. And then on 7, though, he says that science shows that there are undeniable errors in Genesis, in the way that is actually written. And so if you actually read Genesis, like the first part of the Gospel, it shows that the world was created in 7 days, actually 6, and then God actually rested on the 7th. But actually science shows that that's not true, right? Because we have a lot of evidence from fossil record. And another thing is that they say that the animals, they were created exactly the way they are. And nowadays science, especially through geology, they show to us that we have different fossils that are evidence for evolution. Which means organisms, they are not creating as they are today, so species actually evolve. And we can't say that we came from monkeys, that's not accurate. We have the same common ancestor as other apes and other primates. We actually share the same, now science believes that, we share the same common ancestor with all the other living species in the planet. So we all have the same origin. And science believes in Big Bang and how the world was created. It actually is still expanding, which means there's still creation going on every day. It didn't stop in the 6th day. So he said once again that science now shows there are many different errors in the Genesis, in the original Genesis. Although we have to focus on the good side, we cannot deny science. And so they are facts. And he said that's good, that we're learning more, and that we should focus on this. Okay, and then for number 8, he keeps saying there is no revelation superior to the authority of fact. So he said that anytime we have like religion being against science, he said that's not productive. And he said that men are actually to blame for having prematurely founded absolute dogmas. Accommodate ourselves to the new state of things, rather than to cling to old beliefs which are crumbling to pieces at the risk of falling with them. So he says that religion should try to accommodate to the new science, understanding, or the new science knowledge, instead of just denying it because they don't fit with the expected before. Okay, for number 9, he talks about the mission of science. So he actually said that no religion system never gained anything just by denying science at all. And he said that actually quite the opposite. He said that to go against the advance of science is to go against the will of God. Because if religion refuses to accompany science, it is left alone. So he's very explicit in saying that religion should never go like against science. For example, one example is like a law of gravity, right? Nobody denies it. It is impossible to deny it. It is a fact. And he actually believes that the mission of science is to discover the laws of nature. So that was a tool that God gave us. Science is a tool that God gave us with our knowledge and our thoughts that we can actually work on and develop ourselves. And they can never be contrary to the religions founded upon truth. So if a religion is founded on truth, this religion is not going to be denied by science. Okay, then on 10, he talks about how to assimilate the laws of nature revealed by science is to glorify God in his works. So instead of thinking about how science is actually denying God's teachings or God's creation, we can actually have a different view, like a more positive view, or quite the opposite. Actually, if you're studying the laws of nature, you're actually glorifying God's work. You're not going against it. You're just trying to understand how he did it or how he created. And then he talks about there are two different words, as we said at the beginning, and then he gives more specific information. So he said that we have the material world, and that is usually studied by science, right? So we have the material or the physical world. On the other hand, we have humans. In humans, he said they're both made of the material world because we have, in this moment, our physical bodies, but we do have a spiritual side. Or at least he said, even if you don't believe on the spiritual side, like you don't believe we have a soul, at least you believe we have morals. And I don't think anybody denies this. And he said that usually this spiritual or the moral side of humanity, it used to be studied by philosophy. And then he says that the problem with philosophy is that we have all these questions, right? Where are we coming from? Where are we going? What is our future? And what's the meaning of life? And neither science or philosophy can actually answer this. He says that science is mute about these things because science doesn't want to give any opinions or is actually unable to reach this type of questions. On the other hand, he said that he believes that philosophy is only able to give opinions but cannot actually answer to these questions. And then he says that because of that we have very different religions, and the good thing is that they all agree on some things. And one thing that all religions agree is that people have souls, and so humans have soul, and so all of them agree in spirituality. There is something beyond the material world, so that's something all the religions agree with. On the other hand, all religions, or most religions, they disagree with important things that will be able to answer to our questions. And that will be, for example, where do we come from, right? Where's our past? Or why are we occupying this body? Why were we born in this country? Why do we have this specific job? Why do we have this difficult family members? So all these questions that are really hard to answer, and religions, they have different points of view about them. And finally, about the future, that's probably the most important question, at least that's what he says, that we all, when we get ourselves involved with a religion, we want to solve the question about our future. That's probably the thing we worry more about. And he says that since religions, they all talk so many different things about the future, that is one thing that gets people really confused. And so he said that, he doesn't say this, but he says that there's differences in future happiness. So I give some examples. Some religions, they believe that once you are dead or you disincarnate, you are going to go to heaven or to hell. You're going to stay there forever. Some religions believe that we're just going to be resting in peace forever and ever and not doing any more work. You're already done. You did everything you had to do in life. If you did good, you go there, you just rest. If you did bad, I'm sorry for you, no other chance. In Spiritism, though, we believe that the work continues. So we have to keep continuing working and improving ourselves. And that's actually one picture from the movie Nosso. How do they call it? Our home?
Spiritual home.
Spiritual home.
Something like that.
And so this movie, I don't know if you guys saw it. If not, it is really good. And in this case, we can see there are people working as doctors or as nurses, and people who are cleaning the floors, and people who are coming back to our planet to help other people in here. So they're constantly working. Like, you think like you're going to stop, you are not. And so that's what we believe. So it is actually, we're always working so we can improve ourselves.
Ancestral city.
Ancestral City?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that's the
It
name
depends
of
on the translation.
Depends on the translation.
That's what Amazon.com says.
Okay.
Astral City.
Yeah, so that's a good movie. So just in case you want to, and that's a book, of course. So in Portuguese it is Nosso. That is the name of our Spiritist center. Okay, so he says that these different concepts of what our future life is going to be like, it changes what we need to get to this future happiness, right? And he said that this inconsistency between the religions, it makes people have doubts about religion. So he says that man is like an adolescent. I like this connection because I teach adolescents. Man is like an adolescent who has lost the innocent belief of his early years and has not yet obtained the knowledge of more mature age. He has only vague aspirations which he knows not how to define. So, in other words, like, he's not like innocent anymore that he believes in everything, but at the same time, he's not that mature that he can know everything for sure. So people get confused, right? Like, what do we need to be happy? What do we have to do? Do we have to improve ourselves? Do we have to keep doing our best and be nice to people and work so we can evolve ourselves? And this gets people really confused, right? Okay, so when he's almost finishing, he says that Spiritism then comes as a tool. So he compares the different science fields, and he says that Spiritism can be considered experimental because we have a tool that's called mediumship, and that's a new instrument of observation. So he compares this to microscopes. So we use microscopes to see the world that before microscopes were invented, we were not able to see. And there's like bacteria and all the things are microscopic. And he says that we have telescopes so we can see the outside world, like the planets and the stars. And we were not able to see that before we have the tool as well. And then he says that mediumship is a tool or a new form of observation where we can actually connect with the spiritual world, and that allowed us to study and to learn more about this world that some people didn't know existed. And Spiritism is not the first, actually mediums, they always existed. So he's not saying that mediumship was created by Spiritism, he's just saying that Spiritism is using mediumship to learn more about the spiritual world. And then finally, he finished saying that we actually have the spiritual world and the material world. We usually think about them as two divergent things, that they never get together, when in the sense they're actually inseparable, and we just have the material world working with the spiritual world all the time. Okay, and then in my class I was teaching about the Big Bang Theory last week, and some kids were like, Miss Rossi, I want you to know, they always ask so many questions, and they were like, do you believe in Big Bang? I said, yes, I do believe in Big Bang. There's a lot of evidence for it. The universe is still expanding, and so on. And they were, do you believe in God? And I try not to talk about God in my classroom because the state asks, like, when you go to the teaching credential program, they say you should not talk about religion, especially because there are people in your classroom that have very different backgrounds. And I do have many students in my classroom that I know they are from different religions, but when they ask you, you are allowed to answer. And then I said, yes, I do believe in God. And they were, so how can you believe in Big Bang? That's what most people ask. Okay, science doesn't know everything. Like, we know now there was Big Bang, but we don't know what created it. So there are not answers for everything. If you look just at religion, we cannot answer everything by itself. If you look just at religion, you cannot answer everything as well. So if you don't have both sides combined, it is actually hard to have like a complete understanding of the word, and we don't have still a complete understanding of the word, even combining both of them. So, but it is hard. Even I remember when I was doing my master's in Brazil, my professor, she said, she was talking about a friend she had, and none of my friends, they were religious, except for me. And she was saying, she didn't know I had a religion, and so she was talking about the other person. She goes, I can't believe I have a friend and she's a scientist, but she believes in God and she's religious. And then I said, I believe in God as well. She goes, I can't understand, like, how can you believe in the material world and the physical world and still believe there's something that we can see? And it was for me back then harder to explain than it is today. But as if you know, like, we can, it's like something that is inside us, that feeling that God exists and something bigger exists. And the good thing about Spiritism is that it gives a little bit more support or more scaffold in the sense that we can have this faith that is reasoned, right? You have reason in your faith in the sense that it is not denied by science at all. So it makes it easier. But many people, unfortunately, they don't learn about Spiritism enough, or they never heard about it, and so they know that it's possible to have a religion that actually doesn't deny science.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
One of the most obvious reasons why you can get science and religion together if you have like the Bible as a reference. You know what I mean? Because these people, when they talk religion, they talk about Bible. They don't even know there is something beyond Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a hard because that's their reference. So yes, it is very hard if you have that as a reference.
Yeah, you're right. Especially the Old Testament, right?
Exactly.
Because there's like,
and these people, they grow up, they were raised on that, and most of them turn their back from it because they understood that that's not true.
mm-hmm.
So they have like this true and this true. So it's two extremes.
Mm-hmm.
Now Spiritism, I would say it's in between. Like you have the balance of it, and that's why for them it's impossible.
Yeah, and that reminds me that we were talking about this, and Klaus said, you know, Einstein, when he came, he actually not denied Newton's laws, but he said there is something beyond it. So Newton's laws are true most of the time, but sometimes you have something else that's like the relativity law. But it is the same, like maybe the person is even still able to believe in the Bible and believe in religion, even if the person believes in the Old Testament, as long as the person understands that not all the things apply all the time, right? You always have like some exceptions, and if you're not looking at it word by word. But I agree with you, if you have this, just this view that religion is only like the Old Testament the way it is a little harder to connect. And then I really like this picture because it is showing like the creation of God and still evolution, and so both words are combined. And then there was Einstein, who was a religious person, and he said that science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. So I really like this quote because it resonates with me in the sense that it's great if you have one. I mean, science is awesome. Like, it is actually good. Even as Spiritists, we should think about science as a tool for our own intellectual development. Because we believe as scientists that we have, as Spiritists, that we have to develop in more than one way, right? So we have to develop our moral side and our spiritual side, but at the same time we have to develop our knowledge and our intelligence side as well. So science is a tool for us to develop this knowledge or this intelligence side. But on the other hand, if you don't have, I wouldn't even say religion, because some people, they're not religious, but they're really moral, they have a lot of moral values in them. So if you have no moral values, then science may not be as good. So one example would be, you know, if people build an atomic bomb, maybe they're really smart, they have a lot of intelligence, but they want to destroy the world, let's say, something like this. The person maybe doesn't have like the moral values behind the scientific or the knowledge behind it, right? So great word would be if we could have all the things combined. Okay, and then in the gospel, so now we're moving on to another of the books of the codification. He says that science and religion, they are two levers of human intelligence. One revealing the laws of the material world, the other revealing those of the moral world. But seeing that these laws have the same principle, which is God, they cannot contradict themselves. So they say that the principle of everything is God, both for the spiritual world and for the material world, and so there is no way they can actually go against each other. The incompatibility that apparently exists between these ideas proves that they have been incorrectly interpreted due to excessive explicitness on both sides. So on one hand, and he talks about this later, on one hand we have people who are scientists who are blind to anything that is not physical, and they don't even want to listen about it or to have anything to do with it. And it's easier to judge something that you don't know about. And on the other hand, we have people who are really religious and they don't want to hear about anything that is maybe going to deny their own beliefs, right? For example, if you believe that the world was created in 6 days, you don't want to hear about evolution because that's going to deny what you already believe. And so this incompatibility is actually made of usually people who are stuck to their own ideas and not open to other points of view. Okay, so I don't know how many of you guys know Bro Teixeira. I like him a lot, and so in one of his lectures, he's a physicist in Brazil. He has his PhD, a very well-known scientist, but he's a spiritualist. Actually, he is into Spiritism, and he gives lectures. In one of his lectures, he talked about the relationship between science and Spiritism, so I actually recommend you to watch this one if you want to know more about this relation, because he's much better than I am in explaining all these things. But he said that what makes people sometimes confused is that people say that Spiritism is a science. And he says that he doesn't agree with that, and my personal opinion, I don't agree with that as well. I agree that Spiritism uses reason, and I agree that Spiritism to use the scientific method, but being a science depends on the concept of science that you're using. Because usually when we say something is a science, it means that the whole scientific community agree with it. And in that case, we know that it's not true yet, right? Maybe one day, not yet. So we have to keep this in mind. Like sometimes we say, oh no, my religion is a science. Maybe we may be scaring people away in the sense that we have some, for example, we believe that God exists, and that is something that is hard to prove. It cannot be unproven though, but it is hard to prove. And so that's why some people are kind of afraid of saying that Spiritism is a science. But once again, it does use the scientific method in the sense that it collects information and it is all taught, and we use reason to think about it, right? It's not just blind belief. And today there are many different scientific works that actually study Spiritism or spiritualist, let's say like the phenomena. So for the first one, I didn't know about this, and so I was really glad when I was researching about it. There are multiple different universities in Brazil. They're studying Chico Xavier's letters. So the psychograph letters that he wrote, they're studying it. And in the study, they are trying to show like coherence between the letters of the same spiritual author. And so they actually found that there is a lot of resemblance, and you will be so highly unlikely that he will be able to gather all this data from these families and write these letters, that it is more likely to believe that it is true. So I really like reading a little bit about it, but that's a very bright side, right? So people are already researching about it. People in the scientific field, they're already like being able to do this, and they were actually they had funding, which means it is credible research. It's not like people are already like being interested in it. There are books, many books actually, about Spiritism and mental health and spirituality and psychotherapy, or how does religion affect the body. There are many medical spiritist associations throughout the world, and in Brazil there is a medical spiritist congress. And my mom is a doctor, and so sometimes she goes to this congress, and they have people like Divaldo Franco going there and giving speeches. So they are already connecting like the spiritual world and the material world. And that reminds me that my mom told me that now they just enter in the code of illness. So that is a code that they use for some illnesses, and they just put obsession as one illness in like the book in Brazil. So it is already considered like one illness. It's not. So it is like from the medical society. One illness.
Doença.
Like a disease.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Illness. Okay.
Yeah. And so they have different diseases in there. And for example, schizophrenia is one. So in the mental part, they have obsession as one disease as well. So it is already an advance that medicine and scientists are already thinking about the no material world, right, and how it affects us. Okay, so all this well-being and health and spirituality connections, they're being made all the time. Okay, and then I'm almost done here. So there is one very good TED Talk that Paul showed me, and the name of the person is Tony Jack, and he's a scientist as well. And he talks about the difference between analytical and empathetic thoughts and how our brain works. And he says that we have our analytical side, that will be more our scientific side. When we think about things, for example, like when we have like a math problem, we have to find a solution for it. Or when we have to think about a particular situation, but just, let's say, just without the feelings, right? So that's just like analyzing it. And then we have the empathetic side that will be thinking more with our feelings and connecting to other people's feelings. And he said that they did a lot of research and they were able to realize that our brain can either use one or the other one. It is really hard. Most people cannot use both of them at the same time. So we are in a constant seesaw where we go up and down. So that will be either using your scientific or your analytical side, or you're using your empathetic side, and that is actually hard to balance. And he said that usually people who are more like, they don't believe in anything, they just use the analytical side all the time, and it is harder for them to use the empathetic side most often.
So it's basically IQ versus EQ.
I don't know.
IQ, EQ, emotional intelligence.
And then, maybe, I'm not sure, but that's probably, yeah. And so he didn't use those terms in the lecture, but I think so. And so, yeah, and so he said that although he was a scientist and he believes in God and he's religious, but it is really hard to find this balance between two things. And then he gives a very good point about does society only follow things based on scientific knowledge? Because we're saying, like, religion is not true because we have all the science knowledge behind it to back it up. So do we only follow things because they're scientific proven? Is that true?
Not even science.
Not, right? Not all the time. And so one very good example that he gives us is U.S. Constitution. So if you read the Constitution, that is one part that he says. And once again, that's what's his name? Tony Jack. Okay, so that's not my idea. That's his. So he said that in the Constitution we can read, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's the Declaration of Independence. And okay, it says all men are created equal. Do you guys think that's based on science? Well, it's not, right? Actually, science quite proves the contrary. We are actually born differently from each other. We have different genetic codes in ourselves. So actually, nobody is equal. Even if we have like a twin, the person has some differences because there are mutations. So men are not created equal. So what is this based on? So if that's not based on science, what are these laws that we follow based on?
The Masons.
The what?
Moral values.
The Masons wrote that.
Or moral values, right? So they're based on moral values. Okay? So if they're based on moral values, it is saying that we already, as a society, we already follow things. They're not only based in science. We're already following things. They're based on moral values, and that's important. If we didn't have this, we'd probably be much worse than we are today, right? In the sense that laws are here like to help us evolve, because people have to learn things they have to follow so they can live with each other. Okay. Okay, then to conclude, so Spiritism complements science, so they are actually not opposites, quite the opposite, they actually complement each other. Scientific knowledge is important for human development. That's a tool, so scientific knowledge is a tool for our development as well, not necessarily for our moral development, but for sure it is important for our intelligence development. And then we can't forget always that is all the moral side or the moral aspect of Spiritism. That is something important for us as human beings as well. So there is the scientific side in the sense that we're using reason, but there is as well the moral aspect of Spiritism, and that is the one that we should usually focus on when you're thinking about improving ourselves and working so we can evolve and do better, right? So anytime you see somebody talking about science, we can say it is excluded of religion, and the same is true as well for religion, right? We can actually combine both words, and that will be the most amazing experience, if possible.